This is Pam. I am with ROC Metaphysical, which is an online metaphysical magazine. Every month, the first of the month, new articles come out. And today we're going to be interviewing one of my contributing writers. So if you want to find the magazine, I've got a video editor now. And so it should be down below where you can see the name of the magazine, so you can find it online. It's also on Facebook and Instagram. You know, we have to do all our social media work. Also, there's events and classes and all kinds of information about that. And the magazine is more of a positive-based magazine where we're sharing information, helping to educate and give people a focus on the positive, the what ifs, and what happened ages and eons ago, and how is that impacting us now, which is kind of comes where Ethan falls in this a lot. He's one of my contributing writers, and we're going to talk about some of the topics that he feels strongly about and has provided articles. I know that Egypt seems to be one of the topics that you like to write about. And is there a specific reasoning why Egypt and Thoth and that is articles about that?
Well, Thoth is the god of wisdom and writing, so he comes up a lot. And he's also the, you know, the tree from which all the branches of knowledge, whether it's medicine or metaphysics, really stem from. In this archetype and in this, kind of phenomenon of ancient wisdom, his directly from Egypt, his persona will come up, and also several different formations of him also come up from different cultures. So he's kind of everywhere. What originally kind of led me to write about Thoth is kind of bringing together the East and West in a book I wrote, The Tao of Thoth. And I was looking at certain lessons of East and West and kind of looking for that correspondence. And I ultimately found several. One of the things about the Thoth archetype is his being responsible for divination. He is related to the tarot, and his archetype, as I put forth, his kind of shared character of the East is called Fuzi, and his feminine counterpart is Nuwa, and Fuzi is responsible for the I Ching, which is of course, divination tool of the East. And the I Ching uses the Bagua, which literally means a set of 8. But the Bagua is a set of 8 trigrams, or 3-line figures, that when combined with when one of the 8 is combined with another of the 8, there are 64 potentials, and this is the I Ching. So the I Ching is based on these 8 elemental symbols, natural element kind of relationships. And Fuzi is the Thoth archetype of Taoism and the East. And he's responsible for this set of 8, or rather, this process of divination based on this set of 8. And I, of course, was looking at the Kybalion and kind of going off of that to relate what are 7 tenets of Thoth, if you will, that are in the Kybalion. And there is this, of course, missing 8th tenet potentially. So I, as I was researching Thoth and Tahuti, we think is how you pronounce his name in Kemet, ancient Egypt. Um, his every god in Egypt had a city that focused on this particular god or being or beingness, and Thoth, his city was Kamenu, then renamed Hermopolis, and hence the relationship to Hermes and Hermes Trismegistus being another formation of Thoth. And if you look at what that city name means, it means 8 town or city of 8. So and this comes from what are in ancient Egypt these primal gods or elemental energies in the form of gods. uh, it's called the Ogdoad of the Needers. And the Needers are where we get the word nature. And so the city where Thoth was worshipped in focus was also the city of the 8 meters or natural elements, which comes together in this relationship with the Bagua, which people might be able to picture it in their mind. It's around the yin yang symbol often enough are those 8 trigrams.
Right. Feng Shui refers to that, and I've seen the symbol, and I think the lines are representing like water and metal and air and fire, and yes, which they balance each
Mountain.
other.
Yep. Yeah, and they are a series of broken and unbroken lines, and this relates to, of course, a yin yang concept, or Taiji in Chinese Mandarin. They would call that symbol that we call the yin yang the Taiji, and it's made up of yin and yang, and so that's those the yin and yang energies correspond with that broken and unbroken.
Right. So just to go, not a feedback there. So I should say that Ethan's video may be a little slow, but don't let that throw you off. Your speaking voice is clear, so I'm just hoping people pay attention to what you say, and forgive us for the slow video on your end. So my question.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's probably due to the video.
Right, no problem.
I am buried in snow. For folks that don't know, I'm in Tahoe, California, where we just got multiple feet storm after a multiple foot storm. So I think it soaks up the internet rays.
Who knows?
I don't know exactly. It's beyond me, but.
All right. So to go back to Thoth, and I do a lot of reading, and is he a real person, or was he just represented on pillars in Egypt? I mean, do you think he was a real person, or it's just a star being that came down and was in Egypt helping people to develop their intelligence and their different philosophies?
Well, I think it's an energy and an archetype at the least, and also factually, historically speaking, different masters and adepts of medicine and different wisdom teachings were actually awarded with the name or title Thoth, Tahuti. And also in Greek, the same correspondence of traditions, people were given the title Hermes Trismegistus. Very few people, but there were at least maybe less than a handful that have been mentioned about in various writings.
Right. And Hermes Trismegistus, I can't even say his name properly.
Sure.
But I mean, there's many books written about him.
Yeah.
And so he's an interesting person alone, but there's a connection to Thoth and oh jeepers, now what's my point there? Did he have other names in Egypt also besides that? Or maybe I'm thinking through the different civilizations, they referred to him, and you probably made that point where he had all these different names, just like Jesus has all the different names in different cultures or different religions.
And yes, there are several different books that we have pieces of, fragments of, and so on, where we communicate or we are able to read dialogue between Thoth or Tahuti or Hermes and Asclepius, which is his grandfather in some different relationships. And then there's the Pymander too, which is said to be one or the other grandfather, father, teacher, student related to Thoth. Moses is said to be taught by Tahuti in some different stories. And it's also, we see even in the different biblical stories aspects of the Thoth energy being integrated into Jesus, for instance. The Pymander is in one interpretation or translation is the shepherd, right? So Thoth is one of the original shepherds of men. Along, that's where it potentially gets the idea with everyone knows that to be associated
Right?
with
Did
Jesus.
Jesus kind of borrow that, or one of the writers of that chapter in the Bible just kind of?
A lot of course, Egyptian storylines were integrated into the Bible, and many different aspects of Thoth as well. That one, for instance. Um, uh, there was another thought I was thinking of. He, uh, sorry, I'm spacing exactly what I wanted to say. Yeah, you'll find the Thoth archetype, variously adopted in the Bible, and I think it's because he's so likable, and because I mean religion really is the story of our consciousness in a way. So Thoth being the god of consciousness, it'd only be natural that he's so integrated. One thing I remember I wanted to say is that we also see this with a lot of different stories or aspects of gods across the world, but there's a primal version of Thoth and a refined version of Thoth that we're more familiar with. The early version of Thoth is baboon, and the refined version of Thoth is the ibis-headed god, right? So we see this with different gods, and Fuzi has a version of him that's very similar to that, kind of small, squatty with a hammer, and the baboon symbolical representation of Thoth is the more primal one.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where I remember reading something about his representation being with the ibis head. And from what I've read and in different groups that I'm in, is that there were times that and this is a little different, and hopefully people will listen, is that star beings came down and kind of hung out and, you know, mated and procreated and, you know, started building their presence, especially in Egypt. And then part of that was, you know, either they were wearing masks or something to, you know, symbolize who they were, or, and this is kind of out there, is that there was a lot of genetic material, and that, you know, when these star beings came down, decided to kind of play around with DNA and end up taking like animal DNA and human DNA. And that's why you see these glyphs in Egypt with like animal, you know, tops or bottoms. So that's a thought that's
There's
out there.
definitely that possible. Yeah, there's definitely that possibility. What is another layer of the symbolism between the baboon and the ibis?
Okay.
So another layer of that symbolism of the baboon and the ibis-headed version of Thoth is, let me interrupt myself. There's a Freemasonry concept where they ask, the to be more so, where they would ask a fellow potential brother in Masonry, "Are you a traveling man?" Huh? Yeah, I'm headed to Boston, is what maybe a typical person would say. But a fellow Mason might answer, "Yeah, I'm a traveling man. I'm heading east." And the reason this was excuse me if I kill the enunciation of that, but the point is, are you a traveling man? Yes, my brother, I'm heading east. How far east? I keep going east. And in fact, that is symbolic for heading towards the light, always heading towards the sun. And the same thing with the baboon symbolism, potentially a layer of, is that in Egypt, of course, on the Nile, one of the first animals you might hear in the morning is the screaming baboon. So it's one of the first animals to rise to the light. Same thing with the ibis bird. They're up early, up with the light, right? This idea of enlightenment being the obvious pursuit and correspondence. Another aspect of Tahuti, the ibis-headed beak, is it's about piercing, the going through dimensions. Thoth, even compared to the other gods, is different because he can traverse all the dimensions. And in fact, that's why people might be familiar with, whenever there's a problem that one god can't really quite solve, they'll call Thoth, because he can traverse dimensions. Hence the piercing of dimensions, normally envisioned from above the water into the water to grab the fish. But this also goes through in an energetic sense with his beak.
So just how many hundreds of books do you think you've read to accumulate all this knowledge just about this topic? I mean, I know I read a lot.
Well, a lot, but I would quote Manly P. Hall, who I also listen to and read. It's hard to figure out where you learned something, much harder than presenting what you know. So I mean, it's been, a journey of, one of my obsessions, compulsive disorders as I pursue interests, I guess.
Well, I would say, oh, that's terrible feedback. Uh, Hundreds, thousands of books, and one book just leads to another. And in fact, you drop Manly. I just got The Secret Teachings of All Ages.
Wow, cool.
It's, like this thick.
No doubt.
Yeah. And then I found, somebody actually reads the book on YouTube for like 9 hours. So when I, am just kind of lightly doing something, I'll turn it on so I can, hopefully hear some snips, and maybe it's, unconsciously going in,
I enjoy doing that as well.
Yeah. So
Especially with Manly P. Hall. He has hours and hours of lectures on top of that recording of his main book.
yeah, he goes through a lot of like the beginning of time in the book. I started reading it where he's talking about where did it all start, and then he starts going through the different cultures, the different mystery schools, who is doing what, and kind of like it's a family tree, where did this knowledge start, and then how is it coming along. And I just find it very interesting, and usually my friends would say, well, we probably had a prior life there, since we're so interested in, Egypt or Greece, or, I'm just, I would love to have been fly on the wall at one of those mystery schools to find out, what was happening. And I don't know if this is all new topics to people, but I'm hoping once they've heard this, they'll start kind of looking around and reading your stuff and getting books and trying to understand more. I mean, it's such a huge
And
topic.
we live in a most amazing time. Just the subject of Tibetan Buddhism, of one of the, just it being one of the many great teachings of the world, only recently has it been really openly shared as much as it is now. And only recently, of course, could we have all these mystery school teachings available at our fingertips. And so we really have all the universe of the history of all these teachings, which are really, and a way to orient and reorient our internal world. And this may sound like woo, but it's really powerful. And so we're in an amazing time right now where if we start asking the right questions, the answers are there.
And now it's all on YouTube.
And it's all just on one internet site. Yeah.
Right. Hopefully we're providing a lot of information, but I was just amazed at the amount of information on YouTube, on any given topic.
Absolutely.
And, there's people speaking about the topic, and now I've got Gaia channel, which so George Norrie's got a channel where he interviews people, and Mitch Horowitz was on there, and he was talking about Miss Manly P. Hall. I guess he was friends with him, and got to be like in his home or the place where he kept all his records, and sounded very interesting. Oh, I would have loved to have been there too, I can equate it to as like Hall of Records, for the amount of information that he provided in 1920, which is, information that we're thinking about and talking about now, he was talking about it in 1920, and that from what I've read, that was kind of like a big spike in information about spirituality, enlightenment, like, it must have been the universe was saying, okay, this about 1920, this information is going to really come up, because I think even Yogananda was in California like 1920 something, and he made that trek from India all across the US and landed in California. So,
And one thing Manly P. Hall did so exceptionally, and I think more people are doing now. I like to do this at first, I think unconsciously, but Manly P. Hall is so exceptional at bringing in the universalism of teachings, unifying the what might be considered diversity originally or 50 years ago, because of their originations were limited to a certain time and place. But really, at essence, when you start looking at the teachings, you can find these correspondences that magnify the potential of the teachings and also reveal new aspects of the teachings.
yeah, I guess they would call it like unity consciousness, where there's not one right or one wrong, but looking at all the positive information and energy and understandings, and how powerful we are, and what we can do if we connect, internally into a higher place of understanding. So, yeah, people are probably going, what are you talking about?
No, I took the words right out of my mouth, is what I was saying in my mind.
And then I know you write a lot of articles, and Egyptian or Egyptology and Thoth is kind of one thing, but then you also write about, there was one article about 1111. So I don't know if you have interest in like sequential numbers and why that occurs.
I've been able to find a lot of different lessons through numbers. One thing we can find through numbers is, of course, correspondences, right? Where they'll have a teaching that's based on a number or a set of numbered objects, as I mentioned earlier with the Bagua and the Needers. And by the way, Odin, who is the Norse version of Thoth, Tahuti, he is he presents his form of divination, right? So in the runes. So each of these gods are talking about, or the lessons of what is communicated through what people talk about in regards to them, is all about sacred geometrical judgment, if you will. And I mean, what I mean by that is that it is this very basic time and place situational awareness that a warrior might have, like Odin, and also being kind of timeless in the ability to tap into intuition. So with those, I found that eight is a set of eight is very illustrative of this Tahuti archetype. And Odin travels on a horse who is named Slipnir, who slips through dimensions, an eight-legged horse. So there's the eight in the Odin archetype. So numbers, I think, in that respect, can help us find correspondences, and again, build up on lessons and enhance the lessons. The other number, and it's 444 where I am right now, but the other number that I am obsessed with is 4. And I've been able to find a lot of correspondences and lessons that are provided in sets of 4. And I'm working on a book right now called The Fourth Initiation. And it has a lot of Thoth Tahuti conceptuality in it, and also 4. In the Egyptians, there's tons of sets of 4 at this kind of primal basis of what is a complex presentation of metaphysical concepts. You'll find 4 at the basis of things. One, please.
Oh, it sounds like I'm barking on my end.
No, not sorry, not here. No.
Well, I did look up the fourth initiation because, that was the name. I mean, was that the article name or that was the information you were talking about? And I was curious, so of course I Googled it, but Google told me the fourth initiation for Jesus was the crucifixion.
Well, that the story of Jesus is a story of the fourth initiation, if you will, and it is I would say the crucifixion resurrection, actually. For in Indian cosmology, there is creation, preservation, death, and the unsaid 4th aspect, which is resurrection. A renewed baptism, often enough in Christianity.
Or rebirth, they call it.
Exactly. And so we can see these 4 aspects celebrated and pointed to in again all across the world, multiple cultures, but it's quite simple, in that the end is the start of a new beginning, as we see the 4 seasons annually as well. And at Christmas we are celebrating the birth of Christ at the time of year that is symbolic for the resurrection of the Son. So the Son of God. People make the correspondence with Jesus and the crossing of the sky of the spheres. So in a way, we're kind of celebrating his divine birth when at the time of year, actually, we're going through what is in a pagan traditions or just natural kind of understanding, it's the rebirth. It's literally the time of resurrection.
This is just so interesting. I mean, we could just probably talk all night about all this stuff. So I wanted to make sure that you talk about your books, if you want to, mention, highlight one or a couple, and your website, and any other information you want to share.
Yeah, the Tao of Thoth is where I combine East and West into not only principle presentation, but practices as well to kind of embody these 8 tenets, if you will. My most popular book is called The Geometry of Energy, How to Meditate, and I kind of make a meditation lesson out of or stemming from several traditional meditations that depict also this correspondence of the 4 dimensions of geometry. And so I kind of describe it as in geometry helps us understand the physical world, not necessarily limited to, but and meditation helps us understand the internal world, not necessarily limited to. And so The Geometry of Energy is my popular book. The Matrix of 4 is another one, and The Fourth Initiation is coming out, of course, April 4th. 4/4.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I should say, and just by luck of chance, if you believe, a number we picked randomly, 111 is the day to do this interview. So hopefully,
Cool.
it has some good energy with it. And then what about website or, I know your books are on Amazon.
Yep, all my books are on Amazon. The Geometry of Energy is one of my websites. Ethan Indigo Smith. I have a couple. Matrix of Four is another one. For those practitioners that are into intuition, and I'm guessing, maybe I'm intuiting that several folks that are going to be watching this might be. There's one way to perceive where from intuition comes from, and one way to really connect what might be a kind of profound aspect of this fourth aspect that I'm talking about not so infrequently. In There's what I call the Trinity of time: past, present, and future. And obviously everyone is familiar with this, but where does intuition come from? Not necessarily any one of those kind of ideas. It's more of a place of timelessness, right? And so that is the fourth aspect of time, which that's kind of deep, but if you understand intuition, I think it makes sense. It's sensible. Um, one other aspect of four that I would share with folks that helped me find correspondences. If forgive me if I'm talking too much. If this is
No.
this is called the four pards, or PRDS from Hebrew, which does not have vowels in the spelling. In religious interpretation, and of course from that spiritual interpretation and understanding, there's four ways to begin to interpret these lessons or stories, and that is literal and allegorical being the first pairing, if you will. And this is stemming from interpretations of the Bible, like I alluded to, religions, but applicable to many different systems. And then there is the literal, allegorical, and comparative and secretive. And the comparative is kind of what I've been talking about with the eights, the sets of eight being a potential modality of comparison, and numbers having that comparative as well. And the secretive interpretations are, of course, multifaceted and secretive, or can be any number of processes. But the four pards, or four pathways to paradise, is what they're often referred to because of their way to expand our understanding of these lessons, are the literal, allegorical, comparative, and secretive. A powerful set of four to interpret and find different lessons. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, so I should get the book so I can read more about that.
That's a really powerful idea in and of itself.
Yeah. All right. And then, I know you have a couple different websites. Is there one that you want to mention, or?
The Geometry of Energy, I feel like, is the most popular one.
Okay. All right. And so your writing name is Ethan Indigo Smith. So we want to make sure that people have your name. And
yeah, and I'm on all the social media, and should be pretty easy to find very easily. Right.
And your writings are with different formats, but we're not going to mention them. So I guess thank you. And so I would like to recap to say this may be a lot of information that people are not like they may have kind of heard it, or this is all new, but this is like getting down into like the next like level or two of, you know, philosophy and metaphysics and oh jeepers, I don't know if I can even think of a word that, you know, if you want a really deep understanding of a lot of the beginnings of metaphysics and spirituality all came from a lot of what you are investigating and finding out. So it's kind of like building, you know, your foundation. So you have these words and terminologies and phrases so that you know, when you read some other people, you know, you're like, oh, all right, I understand that now. I mean, I went through it, you know, I've got like 1,000 books that, you know, kind of have helped me along the way. So I have a pretty good vocabulary, and you know, I would say sometimes the ideas I struggle with, but you know, I just keep reading and watching YouTube to develop an understanding. And that's kind of the point of what you're doing and why I have the magazine, so we can help people grow. You know, it's like my tagline: to educate and inform, you know, so people will have a better understanding of our world and, you know, all the unseen. I think it's just like magical, mystical, you know, time, and you know, we should have this understanding, you know. So I
Yeah,
got on my
beautiful.
soapbox. You know, I should have been a teacher.
No, well said. Beautiful.
Yeah, so all right, well, I thank you very much, and I guess we'll say thank you, and hopefully the snow melts a little bit,
Yeah,
but people here in central New York are like, yay, keep it.
right. I get it.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to hit the stop button, so
Okay,
thank you.
peace on earth, everyone. Thank you so much.